Hello, today we're going to talk about relative clauses part 1. The aims of this presentation are the following. First, we're going to explain why we use relative clauses. Then, we're going to learn about the relative pronouns used to introduce a relative clause. We are going to also talk about the different types of relative clauses, defining and non-defining. We're going to focus on their grammatical and different meanings. And finally, we're going to illustrate the theory with some practical exercises. Relative clauses. Why do we use relative clauses? Well, relative clauses are used to identify people and things or to provide extra information about them. Clauses like these are normally called relative clauses. Let's have a look at one example on the screen. Agriculture is a science that, or which, studies the cultivation of the soil, crop production and livestock raising. Well, sentences with relative clauses can be seen as a combination of two sentences which have some information in common. For example, manure is a substance, and manure can be used to cultivate the soil. In this sentence, we have a piece of information that is repeated. This piece of information is manure. So, to avoid repetition, we normally join these two sentences with a relative pronoun. The resulting sentence would be: manure is a substance which can be used to cultivate the soil, which is a relative pronoun. Okay, now we're going to have a look at the relative pronouns that we use to join two relative sentences. Relative clauses are normally introduced by a subject relative pronoun, which can be who, whom, or that for people, which or that for places or things. For example, I forgot the name of the farmer who told me that. This is a fertilizer which you need to have a great yield. Relative clauses can also be introduced by an adverbial relative. For example, when, where, and why, which refer to time, place, and reason. Let's have a look at some examples on the screen. I'll never forget the day when I first met you. Do you know a farm where I can buy fresh eggs? Do you know the reason why she doesn't like me? Okay, a relative clause can also be introduced by whose. Whose is a possessive relative word. It normally replaces the possessive determiner his, her, it, and is always followed by a noun phrase, not a clause. Let's have a look at the example. Forestry is a science whose main objective is to cultivate, maintain, and develop forests. In this case, whose is a possessive relative word and is followed by a noun phrase, main objective. Right, now we're going to have a look at the types of relative clauses. There are two main types. Type 1 is defining relative clauses. When do we use defining relative clauses? They are used to identify which member of a group the sentence talks about. Let's have a look at an example. Imagine that I've got 3 tractors, okay? And I have the following sentence. The tractor which is in the garage is broken. The relative clause here is necessary to identify which tractor I'm talking about. Remember that I have 3 tractors, but only the tractor which is in the garage is broken. The other 2 tractors are in very good condition. On the contrary, we use non-defining relative clauses simply to give additional information about the noun they refer to. So the noun is normally identified. The hearer knows who or what we are talking about. So this information is not necessary. Let's have a look at another example. Imagine that I've got only 1 tractor, and I say the tractor, which is in the garage, is broken. In this case, the relative clause, which is in the garage, is just providing extra information, because I know and the hearer knows which tractor I am talking about. Okay. Sometimes a non-defining relative clause is separated from the rest of the sentence by commas and intonation pauses. This is one of the ways to distinguish non-relative relative clauses from defining relative clauses. Let's have a look at the example. The forester, who is going to retire soon, lives near the forest. Okay, Another grammatical restriction is that we only use which and who for things and people in non-defining relative clauses. So the use of that is prohibited. Okay, now let's have a look at the meaning differences between defining and non-defining relative clauses. Let's have a look at the two following sentences. The switch, which is on the back, is off. The switch, that of which is on the back, is off. So what do you think are the meaning differences between defining versus non-defining relative clauses? Well, let's have a look. In the first sentence, the switch, which is on the back, is off. Presumably, the machine has got only one switch, and this switch is on the back. So, the non-defining relative clause is just giving extra information. In the second sentence, the switch, that of which is on the back, is off. The machine has more than one, and only the switch on the back is off. So, again, we need this sentence, which is on the back, to identify the switch we are talking about. Okay, now let's have a look at several exercises to practice the theory. Join the following sentences with a relative pronoun. Number 1. Remember that when you have to join two sentences, you first have to identify the piece of information they have in common. So let's have a look at this. Bird flu is an infection caused by avian influenza viruses. These flu viruses occur naturally among birds. So the answer would be, bird flu is an infection caused by avian influenza viruses which occur naturally among birds. Let's have a look at the next sentence. A vegetable is a herbaceous plant. A vegetable is grown for an edible part. Solution. A vegetable is a herbaceous plant which or that is grown for an edible part. Now let's continue with sentence number 3. The flowers of the cacao tree appear in abundance twice a year. The flowers can be present at all times. And the answer would be, the flowers of the cacao tree, which can be present at all times, appear in abundance twice a year. And finally, the last sentence. Cacao is a tropical evergreen plant indigenous to the equatorial regions of the Americas. Cacao produces the cocoa bean. And the answer would be, cacao, which produces the cocoa bean, is a tropical evergreen plant indigenous to the equatorial regions of the Americas. And that is all for today. Thank you very much.